Throughout history, human wars have rarely been fought by humans alone. In many conflicts, armies relied on animals for transport, communication, protection, and survival. Long before trucks, radios, or aircraft existed, animals were already essential partners on the battlefield. Horses carried riders across rough terrain and through smoke-filled battlefields. Camels crossed deserts with soldiers, supplies, and water. Elephants in earlier centuries pushed through enemy lines like living engines. Smaller creatures also played vital roles. Pigeons carried tiny capsules filled with written messages over dangerous distances. Dogs guarded camps, tracked enemies, and warned soldiers about approaching danger. These animals shared the same cold, hunger, exhaustion, and fear faced by soldiers, yet their stories are often missing from famous war histories. When the 20th century erupted into global conflict, animals once again marched beside human armies. Nowhere was this partnership clearer than during the Second World War, where thousands of animals served across continents, oceans, jungles, mountains, and ruined cities. Their presence shaped daily military life in ways machines alone could never replace. Understanding their role helps us see war from a wider perspective, one that includes loyalty, instinct, partnership, and sacrifice shared between species in humanity's most violent moments. World War II, lasting from 1939 to 1945, became the largest and most destructive conflict in modern history. Millions of soldiers fought across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the vast Pacific Ocean. They battled in frozen forests, burning deserts, muddy fields, steep mountains, and isolated islands. The war introduced powerful technologies including tanks, long-range bombers, submarines, radar, and radio communication. Yet even with these innovations, armies constantly faced problems machines could not solve. Roads were destroyed, jungles were too dense, mountains too narrow, and radios sometimes failed or were intercepted by the enemy. In those moments, animals became reliable partners once again. Mules climbed rocky paths carrying ammunition. Horses moved quietly where engines would reveal a position. Dogs detected hidden enemies before soldiers noticed movement. Carrier pigeons flew above gunfire, delivering messages that could change the outcome of battles. Because of these advantages, many nations maintained organized animal programs during the war. The United States military in particular developed structured training systems that prepared thousands of animals for service in patrols, transport, communication, rescue, and protection, proving that even in an age of machines, living allies still mattered deeply on the battlefield, where survival depended daily. During World War II, thousands of animals served alongside American forces in nearly every theater of war. From the forests of Europe to the islands of the Pacific, animals worked, marched, and endured hardship beside soldiers. Many were used for demanding physical labor. Horses and mules carried food, ammunition, radios, medical supplies, and heavy weapons along narrow trails where trucks could never travel. In mountainous regions, they often became the only dependable transport. Other animals were trained for specialized missions. Military dogs, for example, were carefully trained as sentries. They listened for unusual sounds, smelled unfamiliar scents, and alerted soldiers before danger arrived. Some dogs acted as messengers, carrying small packets of information between units. Others became scout dogs, guiding patrols silently through enemy territory while signaling hidden threats. The bond between handler and dog required patience, discipline, and trust. Handlers depended on their animals' instincts, while animals relied on human guidance. Together, they formed small teams capable of surviving dangerous missions where a single mistake could cost many lives. Over time, these working relationships often grew into deep companionship, giving soldiers courage, comfort, and loyalty during the most frightening days of the war, when hope sometimes felt very distant. The presence of these animals was carefully recorded by military photographers and war correspondents sent across the world. Their assignment was to document the experiences of soldiers and the progress of the war. Yet their cameras frequently captured quieter moments that revealed the relationship between humans and animals. Some photographs show dogs walking beside patrols through muddy roads. Others display long lines of mules climbing steep mountain paths loaded with crates of ammunition. There are even images of cats sleeping inside naval ships, surrounded by sailors resting between missions. Today, many of these remarkable photographs are preserved in the United States National Archives and Records Administration, often called NARA. Inside these collections, historians can explore thousands of wartime images. Among them are hundreds that include animals quietly sharing the hardships of military life. These pictures do more than record history. They reveal emotions, exhaustion, relief, friendship, and resilience in environments shaped by constant danger. Through these photographs, we gain a rare view of wartime life, where animals stood beside soldiers not only as workers, but also as companions, sharing silent moments of trust amid chaos, destruction, and uncertainty that defined the global conflict of the 1940s for millions worldwide. Decades after the war ended, these images gained renewed attention. In 1993, the United States National Archives created a special exhibition titled Buddies, Soldiers, and Animals in World War II. The exhibition presented 36 photographs selected from wartime collections. Each image told a story of partnership between species. Visitors saw dogs resting beside tired infantrymen, mules carrying supplies through rain and mud, and small mascots living among entire military units. For many soldiers stationed far from home, animals offered comfort, familiarity, and emotional relief in a brutal environment. A simple moment such as feeding a dog, sharing shelter with a cat, or guiding a patient mule along a mountain trail reminded soldiers of humanity beyond violence. The exhibition traveled to museums across the country, helping new generations understand that wartime history includes not only general strategies and battles, but also loyal animals who worked, suffered, and sometimes died beside the people they served. Their legacy reminds us that courage, loyalty, and companionship can appear in unexpected forms even during humanity's darkest conflicts, when survival depended on cooperation, trust, and the quiet strength of animals standing beside soldiers in the storm of global war and shared struggle together. While many images of World War II show powerful tanks, aircraft, and massive naval fleets, the daily reality for many soldiers was far less mechanical. In many regions where battles were fought, the land itself created enormous challenges for military movement. Roads were destroyed by bombing, forests were thick and tangled, and mountain trails were narrow and dangerous. Heavy trucks and armored vehicles often became trapped in mud or were unable to pass through difficult terrain. In these conditions, armies turned once again to animals, just as they had for thousands of years. Horses became one of the most reliable partners soldiers could have. They were strong, adaptable, and capable of traveling through places where machines simply could not go. American forces used horses in several regions where silence and mobility were important. Unlike vehicles, horses required no fuel and could move quietly through forests and hills without attracting enemy attention. Soldiers riding horseback could travel long distances while carrying weapons, communication equipment, and essential supplies. In difficult environments, the steady movement of a horse often meant the difference between completing a mission and becoming stranded far from safety during wartime operations. Alongside horses, another animal proved even more valuable in some of the harshest environments of the war. The mule, a hybrid between a horse and a donkey, possessed qualities that made it especially suited for military logistics. Mules combined the strength of horses with the endurance and careful footing of donkeys. This combination allowed them to carry heavy loads across steep mountains, rocky slopes, and narrow jungle paths without losing balance. During World War II, thousands of mules were trained in the United States before being transported overseas to assist American troops. Their job was straightforward but essential. Mules carried ammunition, food, radios, medical supplies, and sometimes even pieces of artillery equipment. In mountainous campaigns such as those fought in Italy or the Philippines, mule trains slowly climbed winding trails where trucks could never travel. Soldiers walked beside the animals, guiding them carefully through mud, rain, and unstable ground. Without these animals, many frontline units would have struggled to receive the supplies needed to continue fighting. Mule handlers often spent months working with the same animals, learning their behavior and building trust that helped both soldier and animal endure the challenges of wartime service. Preparing animals for service in war required careful planning and extensive training. The United States military created special training centers where horses and mules were gradually introduced to the sounds and sights of military life. Trainers exposed them to loud gunfire, explosions, moving vehicles, and the constant activity of soldiers working in busy camps. The goal was to prevent fear and panic when the animals eventually entered real battle zones. Animals were also trained to carry heavy loads using specially designed pack saddles that balanced weight evenly across their backs. Soldiers practiced guiding them through narrow paths, steep hills, shallow rivers, and unstable ground. These exercises prepared both the animals and their handlers for the difficult terrain they would encounter overseas. Once deployed, many animals worked long, exhausting hours transporting supplies across landscapes shaped by war. Rain, heat, cold, and thick mud became part of their daily routine. Despite these harsh conditions, horses and mules often demonstrated remarkable endurance. Their ability to keep moving when vehicles failed helped maintain vital supply lines that allowed soldiers to continue operating even in remote or mountainous regions. The presence of horses and mules also had an emotional impact on many soldiers serving far from home. Military life during the war was filled with uncertainty, danger, and long periods of exhaustion. Taking care of animals introduced moments of routine and responsibility into this stressful environment. Soldiers fed the animals, cleaned their equipment, and checked their health before beginning long marches. These daily tasks created small moments of normal life within the chaos of war. Many soldiers spoke to their animals as if they were companions. The animals often responded to familiar voices and calm handling, strengthening the bond between handler and animal. Some soldiers later described how their animals seemed to sense danger before humans did. A horse might become restless or a mule might hesitate when approaching a suspicious path. Whether these reactions were instinct or coincidence, many soldiers learned to trust the animal's behavior. Over time, these animals became more than working partners. They became steady companions whose quiet presence helped soldiers endure the psychological strain of war, reminding them that cooperation between humans and animals could still exist in a world dominated by violence. Although horses and mules rarely appear in dramatic war films or famous battlefield stories, their contribution during World War II was essential. Armies depend on reliable supply systems to survive and operate effectively. Food, ammunition, medical equipment, and communication devices must reach soldiers no matter how difficult the terrain becomes. In many parts of the world, animals provided the only dependable way to move these supplies. Horses and mules crossed narrow bridges, steep mountain trails, flooded fields, and dense forests where vehicles could not operate. Their strength and endurance allowed them to travel long distances while carrying heavy equipment that soldiers needed to continue fighting. Many animals worked until complete exhaustion, and some were injured by enemy fire or harsh conditions. Despite these dangers, they continued moving alongside the troops who depended on them. Their work rarely received public recognition, yet it played a crucial role in maintaining the movement and survival of military units. The story of these animals reminds us that victory in war often depends not only on weapons and strategy, but also on the quiet strength of those who keep armies supplied. During World War II, the United States military created one of the most unusual and effective animal programs of the conflict. This initiative focused on the training and deployment of military dogs. At the beginning of the war, American forces had limited experience using dogs in organized combat roles. However, reports from European armies showed that trained dogs could perform valuable tasks on the battlefield. In response, the United States government launched a national effort known as the War Dog Program. Citizens were encouraged to donate their dogs to help support soldiers fighting overseas. Families across the country answered the call, believing their pets could contribute to the war effort. Thousands of dogs were collected and transported to military training centers where specialists evaluated their behavior, intelligence, and physical strength. Not every dog was suitable for military work. Trainers looked for animals that showed calm behavior, strong obedience, and the ability to adapt to stressful situations. Dogs that passed these evaluations began a new phase of training that slowly transformed them from household pets into disciplined working animals prepared to serve beside soldiers in some of the most dangerous environments of the war. Training a dog for wartime service required patience, consistency, and careful understanding of animal behavior. Military instructors designed specialized programs that introduced the animals to the sights, sounds, and pressures of combat environments. Dogs were gradually exposed to gunfire, explosions, and the loud movement of military vehicles, so that they would not panic when hearing these noises during real battles. Trainers also guided the animals through obstacle courses that simulated battlefield terrain, including trenches, rubble forests, and muddy paths. Each dog was assigned to a specific handler, creating a partnership that became central to their success in the field. The handler was responsible not only for guiding the dog, but also for feeding, grooming, and protecting it during missions. Through daily training exercises, dogs learned to follow silent hand signals rather than spoken commands, allowing patrols to move quietly through hostile territory. Trainers also encouraged the animals to rely on their natural senses, especially smell and hearing. These abilities were far stronger than human senses and could detect hidden movement long before soldiers noticed anything unusual in the surrounding environment. Different categories of war dogs were trained to perform specialized roles that supported military operations. One of the most important types was the scout dog. These animals moved ahead of patrol units, using their senses to detect enemy soldiers hidden in vegetation trenches or ruined buildings. When a scout dog sensed danger, it signaled its handler through quiet body movements, allowing the patrol to stop before entering a potential ambush. Another essential category included messenger dogs. These animals carried small containers attached to their collars that held written messages between military units. In situations where radio communication failed or could reveal a position, messenger dogs delivered information quickly and quietly across dangerous terrain. Sentry dogs represented another critical role within military camps and supply areas. During night watch, these dogs listened for unfamiliar sounds and smelled approaching intruders long before human guards could detect them. Their sharp senses provided an early warning system that helped protect sleeping soldiers and important equipment. Each role required disciplined training, but together these animals formed a flexible and highly effective support force. When war dogs were finally deployed overseas, they quickly demonstrated their value in active combat zones. In the jungles of the Pacific, thick vegetation limited visibility and made it easy for enemy soldiers to hide nearby. Scout dogs often walked at the front of patrol units, carefully scanning the environment with their senses. When they detected unfamiliar movement, scent, or sound, they alerted their handlers immediately. These warnings allowed patrols to avoid deadly ambushes that might otherwise have caused heavy casualties. Soldiers soon learned to trust the instincts of their canine partners. In many cases, veterans later reported that their dogs noticed danger seconds before humans recognized the threat. Messenger dogs also performed vital duties during chaotic battles when communication lines were destroyed or radios stopped functioning. Carrying urgent written messages between separated units, these animals maintained coordination during critical moments of combat. Despite gunfire, explosions, and confusion, many messenger dogs completed their assignments successfully. Their speed, determination, and training allowed them to cross dangerous ground and deliver information that helped commanders make important decisions during fast-changing battlefield situations. For the soldiers who served beside them, these dogs quickly became more than trained military assets. Living together in harsh environments created strong bonds between handlers and animals. Handlers relied on their dogs' instincts for safety, while the dogs depended on their human partners for care, protection, and guidance. Many soldiers shared food with their dogs and allowed them to rest nearby during long nights in the field. In an environment filled with stress, exhaustion, and constant danger, the companionship of an animal provided emotional relief. Dogs often sensed the mood of their handlers and remained close during moments of fear or tension. Numerous veterans later described how their dogs refused to abandon them even during heavy fighting. Some animals continued working despite injuries, while others stayed beside wounded soldiers until help arrived. By the end of the war, thousands of dogs had served with American forces, performing duties that saved lives and protected entire patrol units. Their loyalty, courage, and intelligence earned them lasting respect among the soldiers who experienced their extraordinary contributions during wartime service. As the war continued, many stories began to emerge about the courage and loyalty of military dogs serving alongside soldiers. Among the most famous of these animals was a Doberman Pinscher named Kurt, who served with United States Marine Forces in the Pacific Theater. Kurt was trained as a scout dog responsible for detecting enemy presence before patrol units moved forward. During one dangerous patrol on the island of Guam, Kurt suddenly stopped and signaled that something was wrong ahead. His handler quickly understood the warning and ordered the patrol to halt. Moments later, enemy gunfire erupted from hidden positions that the soldiers would have walked directly into if the dog had not sensed danger first. Because of Kurt's warning, the patrol had time to take cover and respond to the attack without suffering heavy casualties. Sadly, during the battle, Kurt was struck by enemy fire and died from his wounds. The soldiers he saved later honored him as the first Marine war dog killed in action during the Guam campaign. His story became a powerful example of how trained animals could change the outcome of dangerous battlefield encounters. Another remarkable war dog was Chips, a German Shepherd mix who served with the United States Army during campaigns in Europe and North Africa. Chips had originally been donated by his family through the War Dog program before being trained for military service. During the Allied invasion of Sicily in 1943, his unit encountered heavy resistance from an enemy machine gun nest hidden inside a small building. The position prevented American soldiers from advancing safely, Without waiting for commands, Chips suddenly broke free from his handler and charged directly toward the building under intense gunfire. Witnesses later reported that the dog leaped through the doorway and attacked the enemy soldiers operating the machine gun. Moments later, the enemy troops surrendered and were taken prisoner by American forces. Chips emerged from the building injured but alive after disabling a position that threatened the entire patrol. His actions allowed the soldiers to continue advancing during the operation. Although military regulations prevented the Army from officially awarding him certain medals, his bravery was widely recognized among the soldiers who witnessed the event. Stories like those of Kurt and Chips were not isolated events. Throughout the war, hundreds of dogs quietly performed heroic actions that saved soldiers during patrols and battles. Scout dogs frequently detected hidden enemy troops before they could launch surprise attacks. Messenger dogs carried vital information across dangerous terrain when communication equipment failed. Sentry dogs protected camps and supplied depots by warning guards about approaching intruders during the night. In many situations, the animals relied entirely on their senses and instincts to guide human soldiers through confusing and unpredictable conditions. Veterans often described moments when their dogs suddenly froze or stared toward dense vegetation moments before enemy soldiers appeared. These brief warnings gave patrols precious seconds to prepare for combat or change direction to avoid danger. While tanks, artillery, and aircraft dominated headlines, the quiet work of war dogs continued largely unnoticed. Yet for the soldiers whose lives were saved, their importance was undeniable. The loyalty, courage, and alertness of these animals repeatedly demonstrated how powerful the partnership between humans and animals could become in extreme circumstances. The bravery of these animals left a deep impression on the soldiers who served with them. Many handlers later wrote or spoke about the unique bond they shared with their dogs during wartime service. Unlike mechanical equipment, a dog responded to emotion, voice tone, and personal connection. Handlers spent countless hours training, feeding, and caring for their animals, creating relationships built on trust and cooperation. In dangerous environments, this bond often strengthened even further. A handler depended on the dog's senses for survival, while the dog depended on the handler for leadership and protection. Some soldiers described their dogs as silent partners who understood their responsibilities without needing words. After difficult battles, handlers often stayed beside their animals, offering comfort if the dog had been frightened or injured during combat. These moments revealed a side of war rarely shown in official reports. Even in the harshest conditions of global conflict, soldiers and animals could form powerful friendships that helped both endure the emotional strain of war. By the end of World War II, thousands of dogs had served in the United States military across Europe, the Pacific, and other regions of conflict. Their contributions ranged from detecting enemies and carrying messages to guarding bases and guiding patrols safely through hostile territory. Many soldiers credited their survival to the instincts and loyalty of these animals. After the war, public recognition for war dogs slowly increased as veterans shared their experiences. Memorials were eventually created to honor the animals that served beside American forces. One of the most well-known memorials stands on the island of Guam, where a statue commemorates the Marine war dogs that helped capture the island in 1944. These memorials remind visitors that the history of war includes not only human soldiers but also animals who demonstrated courage beyond expectation. Their stories continue to inspire respect for the unique partnership that formed between species during one of the most challenging conflicts in modern history. While dogs and horses played important roles on the ground, another group of animals worked in the skies above the battlefield. Carrier pigeons became one of the most reliable communication tools used during World War II. At a time when radios could fail, batteries could die, and enemy forces could intercept transmissions, pigeons provided a simple and dependable solution. These birds were trained to return to their home lofts, even when released many miles away. Military units took advantage of this natural instinct by attaching small message containers to the pigeon's legs. When a soldier released the bird, it would fly back to its base carrying written information that could be vital for commanders. Pigeons were fast, difficult to intercept, and capable of traveling long distances despite dangerous conditions. Many military planners considered them an essential backup system when modern communication technology was unreliable. Throughout the war, thousands of pigeons served with Allied forces, delivering messages between units separated by enemy lines. Their work often occurred in silence high above the chaos of battle, yet the information they carried could determine the success or failure of critical operations across the front lines. Training carrier pigeons for wartime service required careful preparation and organization. Military pigeon units were responsible for breeding, raising, and conditioning the birds to navigate long distances. Trainers gradually released pigeons farther and farther from their home lofts so they could learn to recognize landmarks and develop strong navigation abilities. These birds possessed an extraordinary sense of direction that scientists still study today. Even when flying across unfamiliar territory, pigeons were capable of finding their way back to their base with remarkable accuracy. During World War II, thousands of pigeons were transported to different battle zones where they were kept in portable lofts near military units. Soldiers caring for these birds protected them from weather predators and enemy fire. When an urgent message needed to be delivered, a soldier wrote the information on thin paper, rolled it tightly, and placed it inside a small waterproof capsule attached to the bird's leg. Once released, the pigeon immediately began its journey home. Many birds traveled dozens of miles through storms, smoke, and anti-aircraft fire in order to complete their mission and deliver vital information to waiting commanders. One of the most famous carrier pigeons of the war was a bird named Cher Ami. Although Cher Ami actually served during the First World War, her story inspired continued use of pigeons in later conflicts, including World War II. During the Second Global Conflict, other pigeons repeated similar acts of bravery while delivering messages under extreme conditions. In several situations, entire military units became isolated behind enemy lines with their radios destroyed or captured. Without communication, these soldiers faced the danger of friendly artillery mistakenly targeting their position. In such moments, pigeons became the only way to send urgent warnings. Birds released under these conditions often flew through gunfire, explosions, and severe weather to reach their destination. Some returned injured but still carrying the messages that saved the lives of hundreds of soldiers. Their determination demonstrated how powerful natural instinct could become when combined with human planning and training. For soldiers trapped in desperate situations, the small figure of a pigeon flying toward the sky represented hope that someone would soon receive their call for help. Despite their small size, carrier pigeons completed missions that many humans would have found impossible. During intense battles, communication networks were frequently destroyed by artillery bombing or sabotage. Telephone lines were cut and radio signals were jammed or intercepted by enemy forces. Under these circumstances, commanders needed a communication system that could not easily be disrupted. Pigeons filled this role effectively because they required no electricity, mechanical parts, or complex equipment. Once released, they relied only on their natural ability to navigate back to their home lofts. Some pigeons traveled more than 100 miles to deliver messages from the battlefield to command centers. Military records from the war describe birds returning with damaged feathers, broken wings, or injuries caused by enemy fire. Even when wounded, many pigeons continued flying until they reached their destination. Their persistence impressed the soldiers who depended on them. For communication officers, these birds represented a silent but dependable network that connected distant units during moments when technology could not guarantee success. By the end of World War II, tens of thousands of carrier pigeons had served with Allied forces across Europe and other theaters of war. Many received special recognition for completing dangerous missions that saved soldiers and ensured successful operations. Military organizations even created awards to honor particularly brave birds. One of the most famous of these honors was the Dickin Medal, sometimes called the animal's equivalent of the Victoria Cross. Several pigeons received this award for delivering messages under extremely dangerous conditions. After the war, many surviving pigeons were returned to civilian lofts, where they continued living under the care of breeders and trainers. Their contributions became part of the larger story of animals serving during wartime. Today, historians continue to study their remarkable navigation abilities and the role they played in military communication systems. The legacy of these birds reminds us that even the smallest creatures can carry enormous responsibility when human lives depend on the safe delivery of a simple message. During World War II, soldiers serving far from home often discovered unexpected companionship among animals living near their camps and battle positions. Across Europe, North Africa, and the islands of the Pacific, troops frequently encountered stray animals wandering through destroyed villages, abandoned farms, and damaged cities. Dogs, cats, birds, and sometimes goats approached military camps, searching for food or shelter. Many soldiers, separated from their families and ordinary life, felt an immediate connection with these animals. Sharing a small portion of food or offering protection quickly became an act of quiet adoption. Soon these animals turned into unofficial mascots for entire units. A small dog might follow soldiers around camp, while a cat could sleep quietly among equipment inside a tent or barracks. Although these animals were not trained for military duties, their presence brought comfort to the soldiers who cared for them. In a world filled with danger, noise, and uncertainty, a friendly animal created small moments of peace. These moments reminded soldiers of home, family, and the normal life they hoped to return to after the war finally ended. The tradition of military mascots existed long before the Second World War began. Throughout history, armies had adopted animals as symbols of luck, courage, and unity. During World War II, this tradition continued naturally as soldiers moved through unfamiliar territories and encountered animals living among the ruins of war. Some mascots were secretly brought from home by soldiers who refused to leave their pets behind when they enlisted. Others were animals discovered in nearby villages where families had fled from advancing armies. Once adopted, these animals quickly became part of everyday military routines. Soldiers gave them names, built simple shelters, and shared their food whenever possible. On naval ships, cats were especially popular because they also helped control rats that threatened stored food supplies. Dogs often followed soldiers during daily activities, running beside trucks or resting beside guard posts. These animals did not understand the global conflict surrounding them, yet they offered something extremely valuable to the men who cared for them. Their presence created laughter, comfort, and emotional relief during long and uncertain days of war. For soldiers living under the constant pressure of combat, the presence of an animal often had a powerful psychological effect. Military life during wartime involved exhausting patrols, sudden attacks, and long months without contact with family members back home. These conditions created stress, loneliness, and emotional fatigue among many troops. Caring for a mascot offered a simple but meaningful escape from these pressures. Soldiers fed their animals, brushed their fur, and sometimes built small shelters to protect them from rain or cold winds. These small routines created brief moments of normal life within an environment dominated by strict discipline and constant danger. Many soldiers spoke to their animals as if they were trusted companions, sharing thoughts that were difficult to express to others. The animals responded with simple loyalty, often greeting soldiers enthusiastically when they returned from patrols or dangerous missions. Years after the war ended, many veterans remembered these animals clearly, describing how their quiet companionship helped them maintain emotional strength during some of the hardest moments of their lives. Some mascots became so well known inside their units that they gained recognition beyond the battlefield. Military photographers sometimes captured images of animals living among soldiers, and these photographs later appeared in newspapers and magazines back home. Civilians reading wartime news often found comfort in these lighter moments. A photograph showing a dog sitting beside a group of soldiers or a cat resting calmly on naval equipment revealed a different side of military life. These images reminded families that their loved ones still experienced small moments of peace despite the violence surrounding them. In certain cases, mascots even traveled with their units through multiple campaigns across different countries. As new soldiers joined the unit, the mascot remained a familiar and friendly presence. This continuity created a sense of stability in an environment where everything else constantly changed. Although these animals were never part of official military strategy, their influence on morale and emotional resilience among soldiers proved quietly powerful throughout the war years. When the war finally ended, many soldiers faced difficult decisions about the animals that had accompanied them during years of service. Some mascots were able to travel home with the soldiers who had cared for them throughout the conflict. In other situations, the animals remained in the countries where they had originally been found and were adopted by local families once the fighting stopped. Veterans returning home often told stories about the animals that had shared their wartime experiences. These stories revealed how deeply these relationships had affected the soldiers involved. Official histories of World War II usually focus on battles, weapons, and political leaders, yet the quiet presence of animals formed an important part of everyday life for many troops. The mascots of the war did not influence military strategy or determine the outcome of major battles. However, they helped countless soldiers survive emotionally during one of the most destructive conflicts in human history, reminding them that kindness, loyalty, and companionship could still exist. World War II was fought across many different environments, from the frozen landscapes of Europe to the dense jungles of the Pacific and the dry deserts of North Africa. In each of these places, animals played unique roles that helped soldiers survive and complete their missions. Military planners quickly learned that machines and vehicles did not always perform well in extreme terrain. Mud, mountains, forests, and narrow paths often prevented trucks and tanks from moving supplies to the front lines. In these situations, animals once again proved their value. Horses and mules carried equipment through rough mountain trails where vehicles could not travel. Dogs guided patrols through forests and warned soldiers of approaching danger. Even birds assisted by carrying messages across long distances when communication equipment failed. Soldiers working in remote regions depended heavily on these animals for transportation, communication, and protection. Without their help, many operations would have become far more dangerous and difficult. Each theater of war created different challenges, and animals often provided the flexibility and reliability that military forces needed to adapt to constantly changing conditions. In the mountains of Italy and other parts of Europe, mules became some of the most valuable animals serving alongside Allied troops. These strong and patient animals were perfectly suited for steep rocky terrain where vehicles could not travel safely. Military mule units transported food, ammunition, medical supplies, and heavy equipment across narrow mountain paths. Often these routes were exposed to enemy observation or artillery fire, yet the mules continued moving steadily forward. Soldiers guiding them understood how important these animals were for keeping frontline units supplied. Without regular deliveries of ammunition and food, troops stationed in high mountain positions could quickly become isolated. Mules also carried wounded soldiers down dangerous slopes where medical vehicles could not reach. Their ability to maintain balance on difficult terrain made them incredibly reliable partners for soldiers working in harsh environments. Many soldiers developed strong respect for the animals they worked with daily. The mules rarely panicked under pressure and often completed long journeys through cold weather, darkness, and enemy fire to deliver supplies where they were needed most. Far away from the mountains of Europe, another very different battlefield existed across the islands and jungles of the Pacific Ocean. Dense vegetation, heavy rainfall, and muddy terrain made transportation extremely difficult for military vehicles. In these environments, dogs became especially valuable companions for soldiers moving through unfamiliar territory. War dogs trained by the United States military served as scouts, messengers, and guards. Their powerful senses allowed them to detect enemy soldiers hidden within thick jungle vegetation long before humans could see or hear them. This early warning often saved entire patrols from walking into dangerous ambushes. Dogs also carried messages between units when radio communication was unreliable in remote jungle terrain. Their speed and ability to move quietly through thick undergrowth made them ideal couriers. Many soldiers trusted their canine partners completely, relying on their instincts during tense patrols through dense forests, where visibility was limited and danger could appear at any moment. In North Africa, the battlefield looked entirely different once again. Vast desert landscapes stretched for hundreds of miles under intense heat and powerful sandstorms. Vehicles played an important role in desert warfare, yet animals were still useful in several situations. Camels had been used in desert travel for centuries, and some military forces took advantage of their natural ability to survive in harsh desert climates. These animals could travel long distances with limited water while carrying supplies across sandy terrain. Camels were especially useful for patrols and reconnaissance missions in remote areas where fuel and mechanical support were limited. Local guides often worked with military units and helped soldiers understand how to care for and manage these animals properly. Their experience with desert travel proved valuable when navigating vast open spaces where landmarks were rare. Although camels were not used in large numbers compared to horses or mules, their presence demonstrated how armies adapted traditional knowledge to the unique challenges of desert warfare. Across all these battlefronts, animals demonstrated remarkable adaptability and resilience. Whether climbing mountain paths in Europe, moving silently through jungle forests in the Pacific, or traveling across the deserts of North Africa, these animals supported soldiers in ways that machines alone could not achieve. Their strength, instincts, and endurance helped armies overcome environmental obstacles that might otherwise have slowed or stopped military operations. For many soldiers, these animals were more than tools used during wartime. They became trusted companions whose reliability often meant the difference between success and failure during dangerous missions. The partnership between humans and animals during World War II reflected a long history of cooperation that extended far beyond modern technology. Even as tanks, aircraft, and advanced weapons dominated the battlefield, animals continued to provide essential support in places where machines struggled to operate. Their contribution across different battlefronts remains an important part of the story of how armies adapted to the complex environments of global war. Throughout World War II, countless stories emerged describing animals that saved the lives of soldiers during moments of extreme danger. These animals were not simply companions or symbols of morale. Many of them actively prevented ambushes, delivered life-saving messages, or located wounded soldiers who otherwise might have been left behind on the battlefield. Among the most important life-saving animals were the trained war dogs used by Allied forces. These dogs served as scouts who walked ahead of patrols moving through dangerous territory. With their powerful sense of smell and hearing, they could detect enemy soldiers hiding in forests, ruins, or tall grass long before human senses could notice any sign of danger. When a dog sensed something unusual, it often stopped, stiffened its posture, or quietly signaled its handler. This silent warning allowed soldiers to halt their movement and prepare for a possible ambush. In many situations, these alerts prevented patrols from walking directly into enemy traps. Soldiers who worked with scout dogs often credited them with saving dozens of lives during patrol missions where even a few seconds of warning could determine whether a unit survived or suffered devastating losses. Messenger dogs also played a life-saving role during intense battles when normal communication systems failed. Combat often destroyed telephone lines and damaged radio equipment, leaving units unable to send urgent information to nearby forces. In these moments, messenger dogs became vital links between isolated groups of soldiers. Trained to run quickly between two designated handlers, these dogs carried small message containers attached to their collars. Because they moved low to the ground and traveled quickly, messenger dogs were often able to cross dangerous areas more safely than human runners. They could pass through ruined streets, shell craters, or dense vegetation while avoiding enemy fire. The messages they carried sometimes included urgent warnings about enemy movements or requests for medical assistance and reinforcements. In several recorded cases, these messages reached commanders just in time to prevent friendly artillery from striking their own troops. Without the speed and determination of these messenger dogs, many soldiers would have been placed in even greater danger during chaotic moments of battle. Another remarkable group of life-saving animals during the war were carrier pigeons. These birds served as aerial messengers capable of traveling long distances, even when radio communication was impossible. Pigeons carried small capsules attached to their legs, containing handwritten messages from soldiers in the field. Once released, the birds relied on their natural homing instinct to return to their base, where the message would be delivered to commanders. Some pigeons completed these journeys under incredibly dangerous conditions. Enemy soldiers sometimes attempted to shoot them down, and harsh weather could make flying extremely difficult. Despite these obstacles, many pigeons successfully delivered messages that saved entire units. In several documented cases, soldiers trapped behind enemy lines released pigeons with urgent messages explaining their position. These messages prevented friendly artillery units from mistakenly firing on their own troops. The pigeons often returned exhausted or injured, but still carrying the information that saved hundreds of lives. Their determination demonstrated how even small creatures could perform extraordinary acts during moments of crisis. Animals also helped rescue wounded soldiers who might otherwise have remained unnoticed on chaotic battlefields. Some military dogs were trained specifically to search for injured soldiers after intense fighting. These dogs moved carefully across battlefields, sniffing for signs of human presence. When they discovered a wounded soldier, they alerted their handler or returned carrying a piece of cloth taken from the injured person's uniform. This signal directed medical teams toward the soldier's location. In other cases, rescue dogs carried small medical kits attached to their harnesses. A wounded soldier who encountered the dog could use the supplies to treat bleeding wounds while waiting for medical help to arrive. These search and rescue missions often took place in areas still threatened by enemy fire, making them extremely dangerous for both humans and animals involved. Yet many rescue dogs repeatedly entered hazardous areas to locate injured soldiers. Their efforts saved lives by ensuring that wounded troops received medical attention, before their injuries became fatal. For the soldiers who witnessed these acts, the bravery of animals left a lasting impression that remained long after the war ended. Veterans frequently shared stories describing how a dog's warning prevented an ambush or how a pigeon's message saved an entire battalion from disaster. These experiences strengthened the belief that animals were not simply tools of war, but loyal partners who shared the risks of combat. In recognition of these contributions, several countries created awards honoring animals that performed exceptional acts of bravery. One of the most famous honors was the Dickin Medal, awarded to animals serving with military forces for acts of courage or devotion to duty. Several dogs and pigeons received this medal during and after the war for their life-saving missions. Their stories continue to be remembered as examples of courage that crossed the boundary between species. The animals who saved soldiers during World War II demonstrated that loyalty, instinct, and determination could become powerful forces even in the harshest moments of human conflict. World War II was one of the most destructive conflicts in human history, and the dangers of war did not affect only soldiers. Thousands of animals, serving alongside military forces, also faced the same risks of artillery fire, explosions, disease, exhaustion, and harsh environmental conditions. Horses, mules, dogs, pigeons, and other animals worked in extremely dangerous environments where survival was never guaranteed. Many animals carried heavy equipment across battlefields filled with mines and shell craters. Others moved through areas under constant artillery bombardment while delivering messages or guiding soldiers through enemy territory. Unlike machines, these animals felt fear, fatigue, and pain, yet they continued performing their duties because of their training and strong bond with their handlers. Soldiers who worked closely with these animals often witnessed the sacrifices they made during difficult missions. For many troops, losing an animal companion during the war could be emotionally devastating. These animals had shared long journeys, dangerous patrols, and exhausting days under fire. Their deaths served as a powerful reminder that the cost of war extended far beyond human casualties alone. War horses and mules faced some of the most physically demanding conditions during the conflict. These animals were responsible for transporting soldiers, pulling artillery equipment, and carrying heavy loads of ammunition and supplies across difficult terrain. In mountain regions and muddy battlefields, vehicles often became useless, leaving animals as the only reliable method of transportation. However, this work exposed them to constant danger. Artillery shells exploding nearby could easily injure or kill animals moving along narrow supply routes. Some horses and mules slipped from steep mountain paths while carrying heavy loads. Others collapsed from exhaustion after traveling long distances with limited food and water. Military records from the war describe countless animals lost during these operations. Despite these risks, the animals continued performing their duties because they had been trained to follow their handlers and remain calm under stressful conditions. Soldiers responsible for caring for these animals often developed deep emotional attachments to them. When an animal was lost during a mission, it affected the entire unit that depended on its strength and reliability. War dogs also faced significant dangers while performing their duties on the battlefield. Scout dogs moved ahead of patrols, where they were often the first to encounter hidden enemy soldiers or traps. Messenger dogs running between units sometimes crossed open areas exposed to gunfire or explosions. Rescue dogs searching for wounded soldiers occasionally entered battlefields that had not yet been fully secured from enemy forces. These missions placed the animals directly in harm's way. Some dogs were injured by gunfire or shrapnel while carrying out their assignments. Others were killed during intense fighting while attempting to warn their handlers of approaching danger. Despite these risks, many dogs continued serving faithfully throughout multiple campaigns. Soldiers who worked closely with war dogs frequently described them as brave and intelligent partners who seemed to understand the seriousness of their missions. The loss of a trained war dog was deeply felt by the soldiers who depended on them for protection and communication during dangerous operations. Carrier pigeons, although small and seemingly fragile, also faced deadly threats during their missions. When released to carry messages, they had to fly across large distances that were sometimes patrolled by enemy soldiers trained to shoot them down. Harsh weather conditions such as storms, strong winds, or freezing temperatures could also endanger these birds during long flights. Despite these dangers, many pigeons successfully delivered their messages, but not all survived the journey. Some returned to their lofts injured or exhausted after narrowly escaping enemy fire. Others never returned at all, having sacrificed their lives while carrying information that could determine the fate of entire military operations. The handlers who cared for these birds understood the risks each time they released one into the sky. Yet they also knew that the message being carried might save hundreds of soldiers on the ground. The courage and reliability shown by these small birds earned them deep respect from the military units that depended on their service. The sacrifices made by animals during World War II did not go completely unnoticed. Many soldiers and commanders recognized that these animals had served with remarkable loyalty and courage despite the dangers surrounding them. After the war, several organizations began honoring the contributions of animals that had participated in military service. Memorials were created in different countries to remember the animals that worked alongside soldiers during the conflict. These memorials serve as reminders that animals also played an important role in wartime history. Today, historians continue to study and document their contributions so that their stories are not forgotten. The animals who died in service during the war represent a powerful symbol of loyalty and sacrifice. Although they could not understand the political reasons behind the conflict, they still shared the hardships and dangers faced by the soldiers who cared for them. Their memory remains an important part of understanding the full human and animal experience of World War II. During World War II, the bravery of animals serving alongside military forces did not go unnoticed. Soldiers and commanders witnessed countless examples of loyalty, intelligence, and courage displayed by dogs, pigeons, horses, and other animals working in dangerous conditions. Many of these animals performed duties that directly saved human lives, sometimes risking their own safety in the process. As these stories spread among military units and eventually reached the public, people began to recognize that the contributions of animals deserved formal acknowledgement. This recognition led to the creation of special awards designed specifically to honor animals that served with distinction during wartime. These awards symbolized gratitude from the soldiers and nations that depended on their service. While animals could not understand medals or ceremonies in the same way humans could, the recognition represented respect for the bond that had developed between soldiers and their animal companions. By honoring these animals, military organizations also honored the countless unnamed animals whose work supported soldiers throughout the difficult years of global conflict. One of the most famous honors created for animals during World War II was the Dickin Medal. Established in 1943 by Maria Dickin, the founder of the British charity known as the People's Dispensary for Sick Animals, this award recognized animals that displayed exceptional bravery or devotion to duty while serving alongside military forces. The medal quickly became known as the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross, one of the highest military decorations awarded to British soldiers. Dogs, pigeons, horses, and even a cat would eventually receive this remarkable honor. Each award told the story of an animal that had performed extraordinary acts under dangerous circumstances. Many of these animals served in communication roles, delivering critical messages when normal equipment had failed. Others helped locate wounded soldiers or warn troops of approaching enemies. The creation of the Dickin Medal demonstrated that society was beginning to recognize animals not only as helpers in war, but also as individuals capable of extraordinary courage and dedication. Several dogs serving with Allied forces received the Dickin Medal for their actions during the war. These war dogs often worked as scouts, messengers, or rescue animals in extremely dangerous environments. Some dogs alerted their handlers to hidden enemy soldiers, preventing deadly ambushes that could have wiped out entire patrols. Others carried urgent messages across battlefields where human messengers would likely have been killed. There were also dogs trained to search for wounded soldiers after intense fighting. Moving carefully through destroyed terrain, they located injured troops who required medical attention. In several cases, these dogs saved multiple lives during a single mission. Soldiers who worked with these animals described them as intelligent partners capable of understanding complex situations. When a dog received the Dickin Medal, the award represented recognition not only for that individual animal, but also for the thousands of other war dogs that served without public attention. Their loyalty and courage became legendary among the soldiers who depended on them every day. Carrier pigeons also received several Dickin Medals for their extraordinary service during World War II. These birds often carried messages across long distances when radio communication was impossible or too dangerous. Their missions required them to fly through storms, enemy gunfire, and unfamiliar territory. Some pigeons completed flights of more than 100 miles to deliver critical information. In several famous cases, pigeons delivered messages that prevented friendly forces from accidentally attacking their own soldiers trapped behind enemy lines. The speed and reliability of these birds made them essential communication tools during the war. When pigeons were awarded medals for bravery, the recognition highlighted the importance of their work. Military units responsible for caring for these birds often developed strong respect for their abilities. Although small and fragile in appearance, these pigeons repeatedly demonstrated incredible determination while performing missions that influenced the outcome of important military operations. The tradition of honoring animals for wartime bravery continues long after World War II ended. Memorials and ceremonies held in several countries remember the animals that served during the conflict. The Dickin Medal continues to be awarded today to animals that perform acts of bravery while working with military or rescue organizations. These recognitions help preserve the stories of animals whose courage might otherwise be forgotten. For historians and veterans, the awards represent more than symbolic gestures. They acknowledge the unique partnership that developed between humans and animals during one of the most challenging periods in modern history. Animals could not choose to participate in war, yet many of them performed their duties with remarkable dedication. By honoring their service, society also honors the soldiers who depended on them and cared for them during dangerous missions. The medals awarded to these animals stand as lasting reminders of loyalty, bravery, and the extraordinary bond shared between species during times of conflict. World War II is often remembered through the stories of soldiers, commanders, and historic battles that changed the course of nations. Yet hidden within these stories is another group of participants whose loyalty and courage rarely receive the same attention. Across battlefields, mountains, deserts, jungles, and oceans, animals served beside humans in one of the most difficult conflicts in history. They carried supplies through dangerous terrain, delivered critical messages when communication failed, guided patrols through enemy territory, and even helped rescue wounded soldiers from the chaos of combat. These animals did not understand the politics of war or the reasons behind the fighting. They simply responded to training, instinct, and the bond they shared with the people who cared for them. Horses climbed narrow mountain trails under heavy loads. Dogs warned soldiers of hidden enemies and searched for the injured after battle. Pigeons crossed hostile skies, carrying messages that saved entire units. Countless animals faced the same dangers as the soldiers beside them, and many never returned from their missions. For the soldiers who served with them, these animals were far more than tools of war. They were companions during long nights on the front lines, silent partners during dangerous patrols, and symbols of comfort in places where hope was often difficult to find. The loyalty shown by these animals created bonds that many veterans remembered for the rest of their lives. Today, memorials around the world honor the animals that served during wartime. Their stories remind us that courage is not limited to humans alone. Even in the darkest moments of history, the partnership between humans and animals proved capable of extraordinary bravery and devotion. The next time we remember the history of World War II, it is worth remembering these silent heroes who walked, ran, and flew beside the soldiers of the war. If you enjoyed this documentary and want to see more true stories from history, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Your support helps keep these stories alive for future generations.